Imagine, for a moment, a formidable military unit, sworn by sacred oath to protect the most powerful man on earth. Their very existence was meant to safeguard his life, his legacy, and the vast, sprawling empire he commanded. Yet, in a terrifying twist of fate, this elite force soon held the emperor's life entirely within their iron grip. They were not merely bodyguards. They became the silent, yet ultimate arbiters of who reigned and who perished. This was Rome's Praetorian Guard, a name that echoes through antiquity with both profound awe and chilling dread. Initially formed as the emperor's personal household troops, their original mandate was unwavering, absolute loyalty. But over centuries, their crucial role distorted, their influence metastasized, transforming them into something far more dangerous. From vigilant, trusted protectors, they cunningly evolved into menacing kingmakers, and often brutal, decisive kingbreakers. This unprecedented, audacious authority allowed them to dictate Rome's destiny, installing or deposing emperors at their whim. By meticulous historical analysis, this elite corps directly or indirectly crushed the reigns of no fewer than 12 Roman emperors. Their very existence posed a fundamental, existential challenge to the notion of supreme, unquestionable imperial authority itself. How did a seemingly loyal, highly privileged military force seize such unchecked power and utterly redefine the nature of Roman rule? This is the central, gripping question we will meticulously unravel. A saga steeped in profound intrigue, ruthless betrayal, and raw human ambition. Through painstaking examination of forgotten historical records and expert military strategic insights, we will expose their dark mechanisms. Prepare to delve into the shadow empire they meticulously forged, a chilling testament to unchecked power and human cunning. Join us now as we embark on this epic journey through the dramatic rise and ultimate reign of Rome's ultimate power brokers. The crucible of Augustus's reign, rising from the ashes of civil war, demanded an unassailable bulwark for the nascent Roman Empire. After decades of relentless internal strife, stability was not merely a political ideal. It was an existential necessity for Rome. Augustus, the architect of the Principate, understood implicitly that his personal safety and the very foundation of his new order hinged on an unparalleled force. He sought a loyalty absolute, a shield impenetrable against the shadows of conspiracy and ambition. From this strategic imperative, the Praetorian Guard was born. Not merely another legion, but a distinct, elevated entity, conceived with a singular, crucial purpose: to protect the emperor and secure his authority. This was no ordinary military formation. Augustus envisioned an elite cadre, men hand-picked for their unwavering devotion, their physical prowess, and their psychological resilience. They would be Rome's finest. Their name itself harked back to the Republican tradition, initially referring to the general's bodyguard in the field, stationed at the Praetorium. Augustus artfully repurposed this historical term for his new, unprecedented force. These initial cohorts, typically 9 in number, were not simply an emperor's personal retinue. They represented the physical manifestation of imperial power. Their presence was a constant, formidable reminder of who truly held sway. Unlike the common legionaries who toiled in distant provinces, the Praetorians enjoyed a privileged proximity to the very heart of Roman power. This distinction immediately set them apart, both in status and in outlook. Their terms of service were significantly more advantageous. While legionaries endured 16 years under the eagle, Praetorians served a mere 12, a testament to their esteemed position. This shorter enlistment, coupled with substantially higher pay, often 3 times that of a regular legionary, attracted the most ambitious and capable soldiers. It was a career path of unparalleled prestige. Further sweetening their recruitment, Praetorians received substantial bonuses upon enlistment and retirement, securing their loyalty through material comfort and future prosperity. Their devotion was meticulously cultivated. Yet, perhaps the most critical and ultimately fatal strategic decision regarding the Praetorian Guard concerned their deployment. Augustus chose to quarter a significant portion of them within Rome itself. This was a radical departure from established custom. For centuries, no armed Roman military units had been permitted within the sacred boundaries of the Palmarium, without express senatorial decree. Augustus, ever the astute manipulator of public perception, was careful to present this as a necessary measure for urban security, a protective shield against brigandage and potential unrest in the vast metropolis. But the true genius and the ultimate danger of this decision lay deeper. It placed the instruments of immense military power directly within the political heart of the empire. 3 cohorts were initially stationed in Rome, disguised as urban cohorts, while the remaining 6 were quartered in nearby towns. But the precedent had been set. The seed of their unprecedented influence was sown. Soon, under Tiberius, all 9 Praetorian cohorts were consolidated into a single, massive fortified camp on the Viminal Hill, the Castra Praetoria. This formidable structure became a permanent fixture of Rome. The sight of their distinctive armor, their disciplined formations, and their visible presence within the capital created an undeniable psychological impact on both citizens and senators alike. No longer a distant force, the Praetorians were a tangible, ever-present reminder of the emperor's power, a force that could be called upon instantly, bypassing the slower mechanisms of the legions. This direct access to Rome, this concentrated power, fundamentally altered the political landscape. The Guard became an undeniable actor in imperial politics, whether by design or by inevitable circumstance. The very nature of the Principate, despite Augustus's carefully crafted facade, was inherently unstable. It was a monarchy disguised as a republic, dependent entirely on the character and authority of the reigning emperor. There was no clear, institutionalized mechanism for succession. Each emperor's death or incapacitation plunged Rome into a period of acute uncertainty, a dangerous power vacuum. In such volatile environments, brute force often becomes the ultimate arbiter. The Praetorian Guard, positioned at the nexus of power, held that very force in its hands. Early emperors quickly understood this dynamic. Their legitimacy, their very lives, often depended on securing the unwavering loyalty of the Praetorian Guard above all else. Consider Tiberius, Augustus's successor, who found himself deeply reliant on Sejanus, his Praetorian prefect. Sejanus, by consolidating the Guard, wielded immense influence, becoming a de facto co-ruler. This dependency on the Praetorians established a perilous precedent. Emperors, needing immediate and decisive backing, would increasingly turn to the Guard for support during crises. Such support, however, came at a price. It emboldened the Guard, revealing to them the true extent of their leverage over the imperial throne. Their allegiance became a commodity, their power undeniable. The Guard's unique privileges, their pay, their quarters, their proximity, created a distinct identity, fostering a fierce loyalty not to Rome, but to the source of their privilege, the emperor. But when an emperor faltered, or when a better offer emerged, that loyalty could swiftly shift. This was the fatal flaw embedded within Augustus's brilliant, yet ultimately perilous design. The seeds of their future dominance were sown in these early decades. A highly privileged, centrally located military force, operating within an unstable political system with no clear succession. This historical context is crucial. Without understanding the meticulous construction of the Guard and the structural vulnerabilities of the early Principate, their later audacious acts remain inexplicable. Expert analysis reveals this strategic error as a paradox. Augustus created the Guard for ultimate security, yet unwittingly forged the ultimate threat to imperial stability. The Praetorians were an elite bodyguard, designed to safeguard Rome's first emperors, but their very creation armed them with the potential to dictate the fate of the empire. Their formation under Augustus thus marks not just the birth of an elite unit, but the inception of a political force that would, over centuries, repeatedly assert its will over the Roman world. History records countless instances where the Guard's presence alone could sway political outcomes, their silent vigil a constant potent warning to any who might challenge the established order. Military strategy dictates that concentrated power, while efficient, also creates a single point of failure. Augustus centralized the military might needed to protect his position, but in doing so, he concentrated immense leverage. The Praetorian prefects, commanders of this elite force, often became figures of immense power themselves, rivaling and sometimes surpassing the authority of even the emperor's closest advisors. Their capacity for political intervention was directly proportional to their strategic placement within the capital and their direct access to the imperial personage. It was a power unlike any other. The ensuing narrative of emperors crushed, deposed, and even murdered by their own supposed protectors is a direct consequence of this initial, calculated, yet ultimately disastrous, strategic decision. The Guard, forged in fire to protect, would itself become the most potent catalyst of political upheaval, a recurring nightmare for the very emperors they were sworn to defend. This elite force, meticulously crafted to be Rome's ultimate shield, would transform into Rome's most formidable and unpredictable political sword, poised to strike at the heart of imperial power. Their journey from loyal protectors to kingmakers and kingbreakers is a testament to the unforeseen consequences of centralized power and the inherent fragility of even the mightiest empires. The stage was set. The Praetorian Guard, Rome's gilded cage and its most dangerous weapon, was now an undeniable player in the epic, bloody game of imperial succession. The imperial court, once a bastion of divine authority, had been shaken to its core by Nero's suicide, plunging Rome into an unprecedented power vacuum. This volatile landscape created fertile ground for a new, terrifying force to assert its dominance. The Praetorian Guard, once merely the emperor's bodyguards, began to see themselves as something far greater. Their formidable strength and proximity to power transformed them into kingmakers. The year 69 AD, known to history as the Year of the Four Emperors, would become the crucible where this chilling new reality was forged, setting a perilous precedent for centuries to come. As chaos threatened to engulf the empire, the venerable general Servius Sulpicius Galba emerged from Hispania, proclaimed emperor by his legions. Rome hoped for a steady hand. Galba arrived with an iron will, intending to restore discipline and fiscal responsibility after Nero's excesses. However, his most immediate challenge lay within the city itself. The Praetorian Guard, accustomed to Nero's lavish donatives, expected similar financial incentives from their new sovereign. They viewed new reigns as opportunities for immense personal gain. Galba, a man of austere principles, made a fatal miscalculation. He refused to pay the enormous donative promised in his name, believing loyalty should be earned, not bought. This decision profoundly alienated the Praetorians. They saw their anticipated wealth vanish, replaced by the strict discipline of a career soldier, sparking intense resentment. Discontent festered swiftly among the elite cohorts. The whispers of disloyalty grew louder, becoming a dangerous undercurrent threatening Galba's precarious grasp on power. Marcus Salvius Otho, a flamboyant senator and former companion of Nero, keenly observed the Guard's mounting frustration. He recognized his own path to the throne. Otho was politically shrewd, meticulously cultivating relationships within the Praetorian ranks. He understood their motivations better than the emperor himself. He promised the Praetorians the very riches Galba withheld, leveraging their greed and resentment into a powerful tool for his own ambition. The deal was struck in shadows. The conspiracy against Galba solidified. The plot moved from hushed conversations to a concrete plan, passed covertly among the Praetorian leadership. January 15th, 69 AD, dawned like any other day in Rome, but it was destined to be etched in blood, marking the chilling entry of the Praetorians into imperial politics. Galba, seemingly oblivious to the immediate danger, proceeded to the forum to perform traditional sacrifices, adhering to the ancient rituals of his office. Meanwhile, Otho made a dramatic exit from the imperial palace, feigning illness to avoid suspicion, a masterstroke of deceit under the very nose of the emperor. His true destination was a secluded spot near the Praetorian camp, where a small but resolute contingent of the guard awaited him, their swords at the ready. With a swift, terrifying declaration, Otho was hailed as emperor by this vanguard. The treason was now an open, violent challenge to Galba's authority. A chilling scene unfolded as the Praetorians, emboldened by their new allegiances, marched through the heart of Rome, their ranks swelling with defiant soldiers. Galba, upon hearing the news, initially dismissed it as a minor disturbance. But as reports worsened, his desperate attempt to rally loyal troops proved futile. The fatal clash occurred in the Roman Forum, the very epicenter of imperial power. History records this as a brutal and swift confrontation. Galba, an old man of 72, found himself abandoned by many of his own retinue. The legions in Rome either hesitated or openly sided with the burgeoning revolt. A Praetorian trooper, Camurius, delivered the killing blow. A blade plunged into the emperor's throat. It was a stark, brutal demonstration of the guard's power. Galba's severed head, a grim trophy, was paraded through the city on a pike, a visceral warning to anyone who might oppose the Praetorians' chosen emperor. Otho was swiftly proclaimed emperor by the Senate, his ascent secured through assassination. His hands were now stained with the blood of an imperial predecessor, yet his triumph was agonizingly short-lived. Far to the north, the legions of Germania had already declared for Vitellius, setting the stage for more civil war. The Praetorians, now deeply invested in Otho's reign, bravely fought for him against the legions of Vitellius, demonstrating their fierce, if transactional, loyalty. Their commitment, however, was not to the empire's stability or any grand ideal. Expert analysis confirms it was purely pragmatic. Otho represented their best interests. Historical records reveal their primary motivation remained self-interest, the promise of wealth and influence, rather than any profound devotion to the man they served. Otho's forces suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Bedriacum. Faced with inevitable capture and prolonging the bloodshed, he made a final, desperate decision. He chose an honorable suicide, sacrificing his own life to prevent further civil war, a move that paradoxically earned him respect even from his enemies. Vitellius then entered Rome, his power consolidated by the Praetorian Guard's acquiescence. They had played their part in a brutal, decisive shift of power. The chilling precedent was irrevocably established. The Praetorian Guard, through sheer force and unbridled treachery, had become the ultimate kingmakers, wielding the true power of life and death over emperors. The illusion of imperial permanence, once a bedrock of Roman might, began to crack under the relentless pressure of its own Praetorian Guard. Their hands, initially sworn to protect the emperor, had long since grown accustomed to the feel of gold and the taste of unbridled power. We now turn to the chilling chronicles of emperors who dared to challenge this formidable force, only to be utterly crushed beneath its heel. The reign of Commodus, a figure of growing instability and capricious cruelty, became a stark prelude to the Guard's escalating avarice. His increasingly tyrannical rule alienated the Senate and even those closest to him, creating a dangerous vacuum of authority. The Praetorians, ever vigilant for opportunity, saw not a sacred leader, but a malleable puppet, or, if necessary, an inconvenient obstacle. By 192 AD, a conspiracy was woven, not by distant rebels, but by figures within the imperial court, with the tacit, perhaps even active approval of the guard's prefects. On the last day of that year, Commodus was strangled in his bath, ending a reign that had driven Rome to the brink of chaos. This was no mere palace intrigue. It was a profound declaration that the Praetorians now held the ultimate veto over the very life of an emperor. The Senate quickly declared Commodus a public enemy, erasing his memory with damnatio memoriae, a clear sign of their own complicity and fear. But the removal of Commodus opened a Pandora's box, revealing the terrifying precedent that legitimate power could be violently seized or bestowed. The stage was set for Publius Helvius Pertinax, an aged, respected senator and former general, to ascend the throne. Pertinax, a man of integrity, immediately sought to restore discipline and curb the extravagant privileges of the Praetorian Guard. He attempted to enforce austerity measures, including the sale of Commodus's personal effects, to replenish the imperial treasury. This direct challenge to their accumulated wealth and decadent lifestyle ignited the Guard's furious resentment. They had placed Pertinax on the throne, expecting a compliant figurehead, not a reformer who threatened their very existence. Less than 3 months into his reign, a contingent of some 300 Praetorians marched on the imperial palace, demanding his head. Pertinax, with remarkable courage, faced them unarmed, attempting to reason with the mutineers, asserting his legitimate authority. His words, however, were drowned out by their bloodlust. One guardsman, a barbarian named Tausius, struck the fatal blow. Pertinax, the emperor of Rome, lay dead, butchered by the very men sworn to protect him, for daring to demand accountability. This brutal assassination sent shockwaves throughout the empire, cementing the Praetorians' chilling reputation as kingmakers and king-destroyers. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic, plunging Rome into an unprecedented crisis of succession and legitimacy. What followed next remains one of the most infamous and disgraceful episodes in Roman history: the auction of the empire itself. The Praetorians, utterly devoid of shame, openly offered the imperial throne to the highest bidder from atop their camp walls. 2 contenders emerged: Sulpicianus, the city prefect and Pertinax's father-in-law, and the immensely wealthy senator Didius Julianus. The bidding war commenced, a spectacle of national humiliation where the sovereignty of Rome was reduced to a mere commodity. Each offer of sesterces promised to the guards was shouted to the assembled, ensuring a transparent, albeit depraved, transaction. Didius Julianus ultimately prevailed, promising 25,000 sesterces to each Praetorian, a staggering sum for their endorsement. The gates were opened, and he was proclaimed emperor, his ascension bought with gold, not legitimacy or military prowess. Rome, the eternal city, had been put up for sale, its most sacred office openly auctioned to the highest bidder by its own guardians. This act of unparalleled avarice and contempt for tradition effectively shattered any remaining illusions of imperial sanctity. The Praetorians, through their reign of terror and insatiable greed, had plunged the very heart of the empire into an abyss of instability. Their actions laid bare the true cost of unchecked power, forever altering the trajectory of Rome's already fragile destiny. The crisis of the 3rd century unleashed an unprecedented period of Roman instability, a maelstrom that would elevate the Praetorian Guard to the very zenith of their fearsome power. Emperors rose and fell with terrifying speed, often at the whim of these elite soldiers. This tumultuous era saw Rome plunged into a near-constant state of civil strife, external pressures mounting on every border. Within this chaos, The Praetorians evolved from mere imperial protectors into the empire's most dangerous kingmakers and executioners. Their barracks, once a symbol of stability, now became the epicenter of power, where allegiance was bought and sold, and an emperor's life hung by the thinnest thread of their favor. The Guard's actions didn't just reflect the chaos. They actively ignited and sustained it. Historical records meticulously document a dizzying succession of soldier emperors, many of whom owed their brief ascent and swift demise directly to the Praetorian cohorts. We witness their transformation into ultimate arbiters of imperial destiny. Consider the formidable Maximinus Thrax, a giant of a man and a career soldier who seized power through military might in 235 AD. His reliance on the legions meant the Praetorians initially upheld his claim, a crucial early endorsement. Yet, as opposition mounted from the Senate and provinces, the Guard's loyalty began to waver, ever opportunistic. Their eyes were fixed on the true source of power, shifting with every military tide. The Senate, desperate to regain control, daringly nominated two civilian emperors, Gordian I and his son, Gordian II, to challenge Maximinus. It was a bold, yet ultimately futile attempt to restore senatorial authority. The Praetorians, under Maximinus's command, swiftly crushed the Gordian rebellion in Africa. But this victory only delayed the inevitable, as the Guard themselves soon grew restless with their absent emperor. Discontent over Maximinus's harsh rule and unending wars led to a conspiracy within the Praetorian ranks. Their disillusionment became the spark for a violent shift in power dynamics. Suddenly, Maximinus, once their formidable commander, became their target. The Praetorians, seeking a new leader closer to Rome and more responsive to their demands, decided his fate. In 238 AD, the very soldiers who had supported his rise brutally assassinated Maximinus Thrax and his son outside Aquileia. Their swift action demonstrated an undeniable, chilling authority. Expert analysis of this period highlights a clear pattern. The Guard's decisive intervention often predicated on an emperor's perceived weakness or unpopularity among the legions. Next came Pupienus and Balbinus, two senators chosen by the desperate Senate to co-rule after Maximinus. Their reign, intended to restore civilian leadership, was tragically short-lived. The Praetorians, disdainful of the Senate's choice and resentful of emperors, not of military stock, viewed them with suspicion and barely concealed contempt. They saw them as weak outsiders. A rivalry between the two senatorial emperors further destabilized their fragile rule. This internal division offered the Praetorians a fatal opportunity, which they seized without hesitation. During the Capitoline Games, the Praetorian Guard stormed the palace. Their fury unchecked, they dragged Pupienus and Balbinus from their thrones, mercilessly parading them through the streets. Before the eyes of a horrified populace, both emperors were brutally murdered by the Praetorians in their own barracks. This gruesome act sent shockwaves throughout the Roman world. It was a stark, brutal demonstration. The Praetorian Guard answered to no one but themselves. They were the ultimate veto power, holding the life and death of emperors in their hands. Immediately after, the Praetorians proclaimed the 13-year-old Gordian III as the new emperor, a pliable figurehead they could easily manipulate. He was a child emperor, their puppet. This chilling cycle of violent usurpation and imperial puppetry defined the crisis of the 3rd century, with the Praetorian Guard consistently at its destructive heart. Philip the Arab, another formidable soldier, ascended to the purple in 244 AD, initially with the Praetorian support. His rise was a masterclass in military-backed political maneuvering. Yet, even an emperor of military pedigree was never safe from their shifting allegiances. The Guard's loyalty was conditional, always ready to pivot to a more promising candidate. When the seasoned general Decius rebelled against Philip, the Praetorians swiftly abandoned their former patron. They cast their lot with the stronger challenger, a predictable and cynical move. At the Battle of Verona in 249 AD, Philip met his end, likely at the hands of his own disillusioned troops, or perhaps even Praetorians who had defected to Decius's cause. This era was a constant, brutal audition for the imperial throne, judged by the Praetorian Guard. Their fickle support plunged Rome into an almost endless sequence of civil wars. The Roman state, besieged by external enemies, was simultaneously tearing itself apart from within, often instigated by its own elite protectors. It was a perilous, unsustainable paradox. Historical records confirm that the Praetorians intervened in the fate of at least a dozen emperors during this period, a testament to their unparalleled, disruptive influence. They possessed the power to make and unmake emperors at will, a privilege no other Roman institution, not even the revered Senate, could truly claim. Their word was law. This was the Praetorian Guard's zenith, a period where their unchecked power held the very fabric of the Roman Empire hostage. They were, truly, the puppet masters. However, this ultimate, terrifying authority also sowed the seeds of their own eventual downfall. Such extreme power, wielded so destructively, could not last indefinitely. The empire, battered and broken by their internal machinations, would one day seek to eradicate the source of this profound instability. Their ultimate fate lay in the balance. The Roman Empire, by the close of the 3rd century, found itself teetering on the precipice, its very foundations eroded by decades of internal strife and the Praetorian Guard's insatiable hunger for power. Their unchecked influence had become a malignant tumor. Emperors rose and fell at the capricious whim of these elite soldiers, transforming the imperial throne into a precarious, fleeting seat of power. This instability was a direct consequence of the Guard's ability to dictate succession. The dire state of affairs demanded a leader of extraordinary vision and unyielding resolve to rescue the collapsing empire from its own internal rot. Such a monumental task required more than mere military might. It needed a systemic overhaul, a complete reevaluation of how imperial power was constituted and protected beyond the reach of a single, powerful military unit. The stage was set for an epic reckoning. Enter Diocletian, a man of humble origins but monumental ambition and an unparalleled understanding of Rome's deep-seated systemic flaws. He was a strategic genius, not just on the battlefield, but in the intricate game of statecraft. He recognized the Praetorian Guard as a symptom of a larger imperial malaise, a concentrated symbol of the military's disproportionate sway over civilian rule. His approach would be indirect, yet devastatingly effective. Diocletian understood that to diminish the Guard's power, one must first diminish their proximity to the emperor and their unique status within the imperial capital. He launched an audacious plan to redefine the very seat of power. By establishing the Tetrarchy, he divided the vast empire into 4 administrative regions, each with its own imperial court and its own military garrisons. This strategic decentralization scattered imperial authority. No longer would Rome be the sole, undisputed center of gravity, the singular prize for ambitious guardsmen. The emperors now resided in cities like Nicomedia, Sirmium, and Trier, far from the Praetorian barracks. This move subtly but effectively stripped the Praetorian Guard of their exclusive access to the emperor and their pivotal role in imperial succession. Their unique position was significantly diluted. Diocletian also implemented sweeping military reforms, expanding the overall size of the army and reorganizing legions, further reducing the Praetorian Guard's relative importance within the broader military structure. He consciously shifted the focus of imperial protection to new, more loyal units stationed at the various imperial courts, bypassing Rome's volatile Praetorians entirely. This was a masterstroke of political chess. While Diocletian's reforms succeeded in stabilizing the empire for a time, they did not utterly dismantle the Praetorian Guard. Their barracks in Rome remained, a simmering cauldron of resentment and ambition. The lesson was clear. Fundamental power structures, once entrenched, are incredibly resistant to change, even by the most formidable of emperors. A more direct, decisive confrontation was inevitable. The Tetrarchy, a brilliant solution for its time, eventually fractured, plunging the empire back into a chaotic maelstrom of civil wars. From this turmoil, a new, formidable figure emerged. Constantine. Constantine, a son of a tetrarch, possessed an indomitable will and a keen strategic mind, honed in the crucible of conflict. He would become the architect of the Praetorian Guard's ultimate demise. His path to sole emperorship was paved with blood and ambition, culminating in a fierce struggle against Maxentius, who held Rome and commanded the loyalty of the now desperate Praetorian Guard. Maxentius, entrenched within the ancient walls of Rome, relied heavily on the prestige and veteran fighting prowess of the Praetorian Guard, believing them to be his unshakable bulwark against any challenger. Constantine, however, was not merely a general. He was a visionary, acutely aware of the symbolic and strategic significance of his impending battle for Rome. He marched on the imperial capital. The stage was set for an epical confrontation, not just between two rival emperors, but between two competing visions for the Roman future. One clinging to old power, the other forging a new path. As Constantine's army approached Rome, Maxentius, against the advice of his generals, and perhaps driven by divine omens or hubris, decided to meet him in open battle outside the city. The fateful day arrived. October 28th, 312 AD. The armies clashed at the Milvian Bridge, a crossing over the Tiber River, north of Rome. This was more than a battle. It was a defining moment for the empire. Constantine's forces, inspired by a pre-battle vision and his tactical brilliance, fought with fervent determination against Maxentius's larger but less cohesive army. The Praetorian Guard, fighting for their very existence and the privileges they had so fiercely protected, spearheaded Maxentius's advance, displaying their legendary courage and martial skill. They fought with the desperation of men whose world was collapsing around them, delivering savage blows, their resolve a testament to their long, storied, and often brutal history. Yet, Constantine's strategic acumen prevailed. His cavalry charges, combined with the disciplined advance of his legions, began to turn the tide against Maxentius's forces. The Praetorian Guard, despite their formidable resistance, found themselves encircled and outmaneuvered, their ranks decimated by Constantine's relentless assault. Maxentius's army began to break, their retreat hampered by the narrow confines of the Milvian Bridge itself. Panic seized their ranks as they tried to escape the carnage. Maxentius himself, along with many of his fleeing soldiers, drowned in the Tiber, bringing a decisive end to the battle and sealing the Praetorian Guard's fate. Constantine entered Rome, not as a conqueror to loot, but as a liberator. His first and most symbolic act was to definitively address the Praetorian problem. He disbanded the Praetorian Guard, dismantling their barracks, scattering their remaining men into various legions across the empire, and effectively erasing their independent identity. The Praetorian Guard, the ultimate kingmakers, the perennial threat to imperial stability, was no more. Their name, once synonymous with power and terror, was consigned to history's pages. This historic act marked a seismic shift in Roman imperial power dynamics. Never again would a single, elite military unit hold such sway over the emperor's destiny. Constantine's victory and the subsequent dismantling of the Guard ushered in a new era, allowing him to consolidate power and establish a truly unified empire under his singular authority. The legacy of the Praetorian Guard serves as a powerful historical warning. Unchecked military power, even in the hands of elite warriors, ultimately corrupts and undermines the very state it purports to protect. The Praetorian Guard, a force initially sworn to protect emperors, ultimately became their greatest threat, a paradox etched into Rome's very foundation. Their saga vividly illustrates the immense fragility of imperial authority when power is concentrated in the hands of a mercenary elite. Time and again, their ambition plunged Rome into chaos, a cyclical pattern of betrayal that undermines stability and trust. This unprecedented military influence serves as a stark historical warning against unchecked power within any state's core. Their legacy profoundly shaped Roman governance, forcing emperors to constantly navigate a treacherous political landscape fraught with internal threats. The Praetorian echo resounds across millennia, a powerful reminder of how absolute power corrupts absolutely and swiftly. From ancient Rome, we glean timeless lessons about human ambition, loyalty's limits, and the constant struggle for control. At Echoes of Antiquity, we meticulously delve into such epic sagas, dissecting the triumphs and tragedies that define our world. If this deep dive into Rome's ultimate power brokers resonated with you, subscribe to our channel for more cinematic histories. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and join our journey through the annals of human courage and conflict.